Thanks for coming out again tonight, and remind all of your friends who are also parents to come to these meetings. If there's any way in which my office can help with that, please let me know. I did want to give you a couple of updates on developments that are going on right now, and I wanted to start with extended school year. So how many parents in the room have children who were in the extended school year program during the summer last year? Okay, so I'm going to pass these out, and everybody can take one if you want. Great. And I'll just say a few things about this. For some of our students, not all of them at all, in fact it's about 1/10 of our students with disabilities, the evaluation teams judge that if the youngster does not receive some educational services during the summer, the student will suffer one of two problems or both. One is regression during the summer, and the other is slow recoupment in the fall. Recoupment is getting back the skills they had this year. So evaluation teams that meet during the year ask the question in the team meeting often, does this youngster need extended school year services? So we plan every year an extended school year program, and we accept any youngsters that are recommended for extended school year into our programs. What I've passed out tonight is the final version approved today for the extended school year program for this coming summer. I think in the last 3 years that I've been standing in front of you during this time of year, 2010, 2011, and now 12, this is the earliest that we've had decisions made about where the programs are going to be. And that's thanks to an effort by Michael Gore's department, the operational departments, to plan summer programs early and give preference to certain categories of programs, and extended school year programs for students with disabilities were in the first category of programs to identify space and times of programs and arrangements for the logistics like staffing and transportation, etc. So what you see on the sheet that's been passed around is the current approved locations and types of programs that will exist this coming summer. Now every time we do this, it is subject to budget allocation, and I was hoping that the budget allocation would actually be done by today, but it isn't. I trust that it will be. It has been for the last 2 years, so when we planned the program, the budget was allocated for it. And I met today with the Deputy Chief Financial Officer, and he felt confident that the budget was going to be there for these programs. But I do know that over the next month, I have to work with the Chief Financial Officer to arrange the budget for these programs. We are going to proceed to post positions for staff and interview staff and start selecting staff now. And as meetings are held this year, as soon as the final budget is approved, which I expect to be sometime the beginning of March, we will start offering assignments for students to programs. Our goal is to have all the assignments made by the beginning of April, so that you have that information so you can decide how you want to plan your summer. We are moving in a couple of directions that we started last year. We're moving again on this. We're going to provide substantial professional development for the staff, better supervision for the staff during the summer, better support services for youngsters who are in the ESY program. Slightly small, in addition, we've added one site, and so the sites will be slightly smaller in terms of numbers of students in each site. Wherever the program is located in a school where there is programming for typically developing youngsters, we will do everything we can to offer opportunities for students with disabilities in the ESY program to participate in activities with typically developing peers. And that is the case in most of the sites. We are working on a couple of other opportunities that are not ESY programs, not extended school year programs. That is, they are not specifically run by my department. They are summer programs, but they are inclusive of kids with disabilities. I don't plan those programs or budget for them. They're planned and budgeted by other departments and by other organizations in Boston and around Boston. And as soon as we get any word of actual offerings and how many seats are available and how it would be arranged, we'll get that information to you right away through SpedPac and through the coordinators in your schools. I can't think of any other basic information, but any questions on ESY programming, extended school year programming, or summer programs? Yeah.
Is it strictly academic, or is it fun for the kids? You know, is there a mix, or is it just like school?
It's not exactly like school. We are, because of the emphasis that the school department has placed on academic development, all summer programming must have an academic focus. We try to build in recreation, and even we try to build enrichment activities for students during the summer program. It's not a long day. I think it's only 5 hours for students. We are required by the school district to make most of it academic, but we try to build the recreation and enrichment into. Many of these sites were chosen because they're air conditioned, and in as many cases as possible the programs are located in schools that have swimming pools so that swimming can be part of the program. There was a question back there. Yeah?
For the parents who aren't aware of ESY, the child's IEP, the extended school year is allowed for them.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you, so I don't know what you said because I couldn't quite hear you.
It's not a question, it's just I'm letting some of the parents know that if your child has ESY in their IEP, then usually they will have the extended school year, unless you decline it. They do ask that you apply for it and send the form back. It's either yes or no, whether your child will be attending the ESY or not.
Yeah, it's not actually an application. We offer a placement. You have to accept a placement or not. You don't have to apply for a placement.
I would just want to add to that to let people know, and even people that end up looking at this video or people that you talk to, that it's really important if people don't want ESY that they let the district know, because John St. Amand and I went and visited all the ESY programs last year, and there was, 30% of kids were registered for the ESY and they didn't show up. So obviously that impacts sort of the planning for staffing and the whole program itself. So, and if people don't want it, they obviously don't have to avail themselves of it. It would be helpful to let the district know, because overall, with regard to special education services, it all comes out of the same budget, and to the extent we don't need to waste money because people don't want to come, that money can be used for something else. So just to let people know, it really is important for planning purposes to say, we're not actually going to do that this summer, we're going to do something else, that's fine, just to let people know, because 30% is a high number, and that's a huge waste of financial resources that we could be using elsewhere.
We do plan the staff and hire staff, get staff ready to work to serve all the youngsters who have ESY in their IEP. We have to do that. If after you have your meeting and an ESY program is offered to you, if you make other plans for your family, or your child's going to go to a different kind of summer program, as Carolyn said, if you would let us know that, we can reallocate resources. There was a question here and then one over there.
What are the chances those instructors will be familiar with the IEP?
They will have the IEPs and they will have reviewed the IEPs before the summer program starts. Developmental delay is a general category.
Yes.
And we try for kids who are categorized as developmentally delayed as to match them with the group of kids that would be most appropriate for them to go to school with. So some of our developmentally delayed kids have intellectual challenges, and some have motor challenges, and some have emotional challenges. We try to match them with the program that's going to give them the right set of services.
Well, developmental delay is a category of disability that's available from 3 to 9. So what you would want to say is sort of, what grade is your child in currently? And then when you look at the list here, it would indicate where the K2s are available, and then you would talk to your SPED coordinator about where children who are similar to your child are going to extended school year, because they really do work out sort of children that have similar needs being in the similar classrooms. So, you know, developmental delay will eventually go into a specific category, and I think it's just more specific on this list. But since they serve that grade level from K to say 3 or 4, then it would be those programs.
Yes.
How do you, like my son has the extended school year in his IEP, do I have to contact the SPED coordinator in his school, or would they contact me to see which one he fits into?
It's usually done in a team discussion, but if your team meeting this year has already gone by, they will be in touch with you.
Thank you actually for getting this out so early, because part of the problem last year was it was so late, and that's probably why camp was not as well attended as it probably should have been.
I agree.
And then they were going to go to 4 days to 5 days and shorter days, and parents were very confused. So hopefully this year they will be better attended. But thank you for getting this out now, because the camp season is going on now.
Yeah. That was, so we talked about, between SpedPac and my office, we talked about the necessity to get this out by February. So you're welcome. It's what we should do anyway. Other questions about ESY? Are there any parents here on another topic who have children in high schools? I just wanted to mention that you may be aware, we've talked here a lot about the development of highly specialized strands in the schools. So children who are in substantially separate classes, now their classes are part of a program in their schools at the K to 8 level. And we have a plan that we developed earlier this year to do the same thing at the high school level, to take isolated, substantially separate classes and make them into strands so that youngsters can stay in the same school for the entire grade range of that school if it's appropriate. And we want to extend that up through high school. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to implement that extension of the strands into the high schools this coming September. It's going to have to wait until September of 13. So there's no disruption in classes. The classes that exist this year will exist next year. If your child's going to a particular high school in a particular program, that program will exist next year. What we won't be able to do is get them reorganized into strands for another whole year. And that has to do with the many changes that are taking place this year in the school district. For instance, 6 of the high schools are moving or expanding. So 6 of the highest functioning high schools are getting larger and or moving to bigger facilities, which is a major change at the high school level. So it was decided that we would not make the Strand change at the high school level. I have mentioned to you that I've been in the process for the last year of hiring new administrators and supervisors in our offices. That process is continuing. We are absolutely happy, very happy about many of the new people who have joined our administrative and supervisory staff. I was hoping to give you this tonight, but my administrative assistant has been sick for the last day and not doing well today either, so I wasn't able to get it completely revised. But there is a new table of who are the specialists in our offices at the grade levels and in the disability areas. Not all of our vacancies are filled yet. We'll continue to look for the best possible leaders to fill our vacancies. But I did want to get out to you the updated version of the table that lists the names of everybody and what their email addresses are and what their telephone numbers are and what specific disability areas or grade levels or both they are responsible for, so you know you don't always have to go through my office. You can go directly to their office, and we'll get that to you just as soon as I get it revised. Let me open it up. Are there questions about anything that you have? Yes?
A couple months ago, you had mentioned about changes that will occur to the transitional classroom. And you said that you would know better this year where that stands and what's going to happen to it.
I'm sorry. I think I'm getting old and my hearing really is failing. I couldn't hear the
Transitional classroom.
transition.
You mentioned a couple months ago that there will be some changes to them, but that you have a better idea this year.
PTCs, do you mean?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, we actually have developed a plan that we're going to start implementing in September, which is we've expanded by 20% already, 25% already, our early childhood program. So we have a lot more classes and a lot more children and a lot more staff in K0 and K1. The programming that's going on at K0, K1, there are 3 different kinds of programs. One is called integrated, which is an inclusive K0, K1, where children with disabilities and their typically developing peers are in the same classes. Then there are categorical programs, so some of our very young children have a high level of need in a particular area, like autism or emotional impairment or multiple disabilities, etc. And we do run some categorical programs for K0, K1, very young children. We also have what are called non-categorical special education classes for that group for developmentally delayed youngsters. We have decided that we need to offer the same kind of programming going up to K2 and first grade. However, we want to emphasize inclusive classrooms. So PTC classes, as you know, are substantially separate. That is, all the children in the class are students with disabilities. And we would like to start to convert some of our PTC classes to integrated K1s and first grades. And that's going to start this September. We don't know yet how many of the PTC classes we're going to be able to convert, because it has something to do with how many K1 students are rising up and what their ed plans call for. But we're going to start the process of converting substantially separate PTC classes into integrated or inclusive K2 and first grade classes. And I hope I'll be able to tell you in the next couple of months which schools are actually going to have the integrated K2 and first grade. We're trying to move in the direction of preferring, for very young children, integrated classes. There's been a preference built in around here, goes back, I guess, a long time, for segregation, even for very young children. And some of the children coming out of coming out of early intervention, there seems to be already the wheels are in motion to get them into substantially separate classes, and we're trying to pull back from that a little bit and encourage evaluation teams and early childhood programs in the community to consider recommending integrated classes.
What do you do for those children that they don't have the ability to be integrated or, in inclusion? What do you do with those children?
Well, we are obligated, and we do, provide full inclusion, partial inclusion, and substantially separate programming at all grade levels.
In the Boston setting?
Yeah. So we will continue to live up to that obligation. So there will always be highly specialized strands into the future.
They no longer run 766?
Well, 766 was the state law that led to our current state law and regulations. So we've come a ways from the days of 766. There's a greater emphasis today on making it possible for children with disabilities to be educated with their non-disabled peers, if that's appropriate for the youngsters.
The reason I asked, I find that I've been exposed to children that are extreme and they're in inclusion, and my thinking is not everyone in the school system is qualified. I found that was something that I experienced, because I have a daughter with autism as well, and some of them didn't have the qualification to, you know what I mean?
Yes, I think unfortunately we have laid the burden for that on the children. We've said, not that we say this explicitly, but we act like the child is responsible for being good enough to be in inclusion. It's supposed to be the other way around. We're supposed to be good enough to help the child be successful in an inclusive setting. And I know that a lot of our staff are quite well qualified to do that, but a lot of them are not. And so we're trying to go in the direction of inclusion intelligently, doing it where we think it's going to work and providing a lot of professional development for staff as we do it.
So what do you do to make sure that they're qualified? I'm sorry, I'm asking too many questions.
No, these are exactly, we watch what they do, we direct their work, and we give them professional development to try to teach them to do a better job. Some of them are successful, some are not. One thing I would want to say is, Boston has a reputation in the country for segregating children. So we segregate, we move children with disabilities into substantially separate classes at a higher rate than most other cities. That signals to me that we're not doing what we should do yet. I think there are some wonderful examples in this city of inclusive places that work with children who, if they weren't in the school they're in, people would say, oh my gosh, that child should never be integrated. That child's too severely needy. But when you visit them in a truly effective, inclusive program, you see that it shouldn't necessarily be related to the level of need of the child. It should be related to the power and capability of the school. Henderson is a great example of, you go and you watch children who in lots of other schools would be in substantially separate classes, but at the Henderson they're fully integrated. Well, that didn't happen magically. That happened because the staff was carefully chosen and trained and supervised and supported and all those things. We're trying to do that in more places.
John, I know from previous conversations that you're essentially pushing to expand the listed inclusion schools. Well, with December here, December SpedPac, you passed out a list, and just in talking to you afterwards, you added school to the list as we were talking. I continue to run into, I visited a lot of schools looking for a middle school for my daughter, who's finishing up at the Mason of 5th grade. And I've, continue to find more than one school that are basically practicing inclusion, but are not on the inclusion list for one reason or another. And I've been told, well, if you think that's the school for your child, then we can make it happen in some sense in terms of placement. Even though my understanding is that if your child has an I-2 or inclusion code, they're not bureaucratically supposed to go to a non-inclusion school. There's some, I don't know if the computer will spit it out or what, but is the inclusion list still a work in progress? Could we expect any more changes in that?
I think I'm going to hire you to be in charge of this. You've been dealing with this so aggressively all year that you know as much as sometimes I do. Let me speak to a couple of those things, okay? When I got here a couple of years ago, I learned that there's a code for an inclusive seat, and the code attaches to the child who sits in that seat. Okay, I think it's quite unfortunate that we refer to our children by codes, and we're trying to stop that. But I've spent some time trying to understand why and how it works and what the strengths and weaknesses of that idea are. This coming year, I've said this a number of times, and I'm sure you're gonna really like expect me at some point to actually do it. This coming year, we're changing the coding system. And in the new coding system, believe me, I've been working on this. It just takes moving a lot of different pieces in this puzzle. In the new coding system, there's no I. There is a code for the child's disability, like L for learning disabilities. There's a code for the child's level of severity, 1 being low, 2 being moderate, 3 being high. And then there's a code for the kind of setting the child is supposed to be in. Full inclusion, partial inclusion, substantially separate, totally separate. And I said 2 years ago, I continue to say today, and it's slowly becoming a reality, all the schools in the city need to be capable of providing full inclusion and partial inclusion. And some schools will need to offer substantially separate. Those are the highly specialized programs. Now, the inclusive schools, we now have a Boston Inclusive Schools Network. It has 19 schools in it. I think last month it had 18. It has 19 schools in it, and soon to be 20, because we're not yet forcing schools to go down this road with us. We're inviting them to. You're right. There are I seats all over the school district in schools. And there are children being partially and fully included all over the school district, some of them with I codes, some of them without. And if somebody might have said to you along the way, well, yeah, that would be a good school for your child to go to, but your child has an I code and there are no I seats in that school. Is that making sense to you? So somebody puts up a barrier and says, your child has an I code, supposed to be in a full inclusion program, and there are no I seats in that school. My answer to that is, no problem, we'll make some I seats in that school. So that's not really a barrier. That's a coding issue. It's not a barrier. Now, people in my office, up till a year ago, thought it was a barrier. And so there were only, if your child carried an I code, which, by the way, I think it's a good thing, but your child carry a night coat, then their choices or the opportunities for placing them were very limited. When I got here, I think we only had some 300 eye seats in the entire school district. There are a lot more kids than that in inclusion now. Now, we're reaching the point where we're going to start to develop guidelines for schools which are becoming inclusive. So I've spent a lot of time looking at programs and talking to staff and talking to principals of schools and trying to learn what gets done well and what's good for what kinds of kids. And we're going to start to write prescriptions for schools that want to become inclusive schools. One thing I've absolutely learned from these schools here is that there is not one model for inclusion. There are many approaches to inclusion that are effective. And it should depend and does depend on who the children are. So a program for certain kids, an effective inclusive program for certain kids may be different from an effective inclusive program for other kinds of kids. Kids are different, services need to be different, structures need to be different. Now the conversations we've had, and this I want to share with everybody, is most of the development of inclusive opportunities has happened at the elementary level. And we're just now beginning to get interest from K-8 schools, so that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade become inclusive, and from a couple of middle schools. And I'm trying to invest time and energy with those schools to move them in that direction.
I guess that was kind of my question. Do schools, how do they become inclusive? Do they have to ask? And do some schools not want to be inclusive?
Great
You know what I
series.
mean, I guess?
Great series of questions. How does the school become inclusive? By working on it.
So I mean,
Okay.
so they have to want to be inclusive.
Well, but sometimes we go in and say to the school, you know, how about if we work together and have your school because you need to improve some things that you're doing. And frankly, I'm not getting a lot of resistance to that. Now, I don't want schools to just sign up for the list. I want them to work on it. They have to do it well. There's no point in having children with disabilities and typically developing kids going to school together not learning. You know, you can do inclusion well or you can do it poorly. I don't particularly want to spend my time doing it poorly. I think there are plenty of really great educators and great educational leaders here who know or are willing to know a lot about this. And I'm spending all my time working with those people right now. It should not be acceptable, your last question. It should not be acceptable that a school says, no thanks, I don't want to do inclusion. That shouldn't be acceptable. And I think we'll get to the point where that's the rule.
And, I'm sorry, just one more. And the pilot schools have to follow this as well?
Pilots,
They're under the same?
yes. And I have to say, I'm working very closely with the principals of a good number of pilot schools right now. They're a great group to work with.
I had found
Stop talking.
they were more easier to work with in the past. I don't know what they are now, like now for the pilot school, they were more flexible than public schools, Boston anyway.
Well, they are public schools.
No, I mean they are.
Oh, regular, what we call traditional schools.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. We have all different brands of schools here, but they're most of them are great to work with. But then most of the traditional schools are great to work with too. There are only a few standouts that I find difficult to work with.
Please point me to that direction.
Toward the difficult ones?
To the
Thank
good
you to
ones.
John for coming tonight to speak to us. Thank you for the ESY information.